Cynthia, how are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Fantastic. You are the Planning and Projects Bureau Chief over at the Idaho Water Resource Board. You oversee cloud seeding, but also other projects at the Water Resource Board. There are a lot of questions about cloud seeding in general, but also people have questions about, hey, look, what's our interaction with this board? Who populates the board? People obviously know the Idaho Power does cloud seeding and it's overseen by the Water Resource Board. So like, what's the relationship? How did we come to this? Like, you guys obviously take applications and certify cloud seeding programs. Talk to me about all this.
Yeah, it sounds great. And just to clarify, I work for the Department of Water Resources. And so the bureau that I oversee or manage and the staff in that bureau are also IDWR employees, but they are assigned to support the Idaho Water Resource Board. So it's kind of an interesting relationship because the Department of Water Resources, or IDWR, is more of a regulatory agency, but the Water Board, which is technically a separate agency, has some different responsibilities, more in the realm of planning, water management, water project development. Okay. And it is made up of 8 individuals who are all appointed by the governor, appointed to 4-year terms, and they represent all areas and regions of the state. So in their capacity, they have the ability to, think through and support. Really, their mandate or the mission is to support sustainable management of the resource, optimization of the water resource, and of state of Idaho, so statewide, and they can do that in a number of different ways. They have a pretty broad range of authorities and options and financial capabilities. So they work, they can promote that water management through policy development. I think the most well-known policy document associated with the Water Resource Board is its state water plan. And that's actually maintained by the board, but adopted by the legislature. So there's input from all directions. And then the board has financial capabilities, so they support a loan program for project developments. They have grant programs. One of the more recent grant programs that they initiated was to support aging infrastructure needs and water infrastructure in particular. But then they also have funding that they can use to support water project development and programs, like the cloud seeding program, like the aquifer or managed recharge program. They investigate additional storage opportunities, and those are examples of programs or efforts, initiatives that they can take on to try and support supplementation or supporting water supply. And then, of course, there are a number of other programs that they can use to, again, support water project development, engage in say, settlement initiatives and things to try and address water use conflicts that, again, are it's a challenge throughout the state, given that there's growth. There are needs in terms of aquifer stabilization across the state. We've heard a lot about that on the Eastern Snake Plain. But yeah, they have a broad-reaching range of responsibilities, and cloud seeding is one of those.
There's a lot. There's a lot there. So you guys deal with conflict between water users, right? So if you have, 2 farmers articulating, okay, who's got water rights and things of this nature, but you're also tasked with trying to maximize the resource itself, right? That's where cloud seeding comes in, or storage. So obviously aquifer recharge, things of that nature. One person came to me after the first interview that I had with Creston and was like, okay, look, there's a huge problem here. I'm like, okay, I'm here for problems. Well, like, what's the problem? And she said, look, we can't sue people. I'm like, okay, who do you want to sue? And they're like, well, we want to sue Idaho Power. It's like, okay, why do you want to sue Idaho Power? They're like, well, we're cloud seeding, or they're cloud seeding. It's like, okay, why is that a problem? They're like, well, they had a myriad of thoughts on why it's a problem, but then they also said there was this bill passed years back that a few years back that said, okay, if these programs are apply through the Water Resource Board, and are accepted and operate in the manner that the Water Resource Board articulates that they can operate, then you don't just get to like roll up and sue them, because they're essentially certified to operate in this manner by the Idaho Water Resource Board. And she was very worried about that. She was like, we're exempting people that should be responsible for this thing. Now, I don't know who should be responsible for what, but like, how does that factor into what the Water Resource Board does? Is it essentially like, hey, we are tasked by the governor to figure out the safest and best ways and most appropriate ways to generate water, and therefore like we validate this, and these people should be able to operate, because if they can't, like if anybody can just walk up and, you know, get mad at them for a number of things, then we wouldn't really be able to generate water.
Right. A great question. And I think that does, I think it's important to circle back to that legislation that was, I think, introduced through House Bill 266, and it was adopted by the legislature back in 2021. So as Kayla's already described, there's a long history of cloud seeding, but it wasn't until 2021 that this legislation came about. And it's that it accomplished a number of things. And I wasn't one of the drafters of that legislation, but I can speak to what I understand. And certainly it accomplishes it. It recognizes that the legislature supports cloud seeding and acknowledges that there are potential benefits, and that it can augment water supplies, and it can certainly benefit those basins that have a need for water supply. It also acknowledges that there is interest by water users and others in expanding cloud seeding into those basins, particularly those that have a need for water supply. In addition to that, it establishes this. I'm very sorry for interrupting. So when you're saying the water users, so like the stakeholders are polled, and it's like, hey, farmer, do you want cloud seeding? And the farmer's like, yes, or at least the people, the water users that need the water say, hey, we have an interest in you increasing this because we're reliant on this water and we think this would benefit us. Is that what, when you say the water users, it's like nobody asks like the random dude, right? They're like, hey, you have water coming out of your tap. Do you want cloud seeding? Like, but when you're talking about like industrial water users, so you might be talking about like hydroelectric generation or agriculture, things of that nature. Yeah. And we sort of loosely refer to the water users because that's obviously the larger constituent group of the Department of Water Resources and the Water Resource Board. Gotcha. But it really does encompass everybody. So you've got obviously agriculture, you've got industry, municipalities, recreational users. So it really, I guess, as Kayla's mentioned, cloud seeding benefits. It's hard. You can't assign one molecule of water to one beneficiary. It benefits the larger water supply system as a whole. But you're right. We've also talked a little bit about the fact that there were water user groups, particularly water districts in some of the basins, the Boise River Basin and in areas of the Upper Snake, historically, that have done their own cloud seeding. So those were, we refer to them as water districts. Water districts address or accommodate water users that have water rights in those
Gotcha.
different basins.
Gotcha. So I'm sorry, I interrupt. So first thing is it made a statement that the legislator is interested in the capacity to augment and increase water. It also acknowledged that the water users were in favor of or interested in increasing water. And you were saying a third thing that 266 did.
Yeah, and specifically that water users are interested in introducing cloud seeding into new basins. And so I think that the perspective behind developing this legislation was that as Kayla mentioned, weather knows no boundaries. Cloud seeding doesn't conveniently conform to boundaries, either geographically or from a regulatory standpoint. So there was a concern, there's support for build out of cloud seeding in other basins, but recognizing that the state didn't want that to occur in a scattershot form.
Gotcha.
So that legislation then creates an obligation for anyone who wants to cloud seed to get authorization from the state to do so. And so that's essentially not quite a permitting process, but it requires authorization and review.
And you keep referencing Kayla. Just for those who didn't see the episode with Kayla, it's Kayla Golden. It's on the channel. You can check it out. Great conversation. And she gave a ton of science and background about what the actual mechanics are, what the history of water in Idaho is, and what the relationship to cloud seeding was going back, many decades. So check that out. But so essentially it creates this mechanism that says, hey, if you want to do this and there is interest in the state to increase cloud seeding in other basins and augment water supply, fantastic. You just have to come through us. Okay. Now, if they come through you, then you say, all right, we have permitted this person and they're operating in a normal way. And therefore they are not subject to, prosecution or lawsuits that are brought to them. Is that accurate? Like if I apply for a permit to cloud seed, and I go out and cloud seed and I do everything that you told me to do and I don't mess around and the whole thing, then you're just saying, if somebody comes to me, they're like, hey, I'm going to sue you, Matt, for cloud seed. I'm like, no, I got a permit. Like I got a permit to do this. Is that kind of an analogous to just like say I'm building a house and somebody's like, hey, I'm going to sue you for building this house. You're blocking my view. I don't like what you're doing with this house. I'm like, whoa. I got a permit. Like you can, like the city approved. Here are the plans, man. Like call the inspector. So it's essentially a standard, analogous to a more standard permit process that we've all experienced in some way, which is there's a government body. They approve a certain course of action. You got to draw between the lines and do exactly what they've said. And if that's the case, then like you can't go sue the contractor for building the house next to you.
Yeah, that's probably a good way to describe it. And I'm not an attorney, but yes, as I understand, the intent behind some of the language that was in the legislation was to avoid that nuisance litigation or lawsuits. Yes, the intent was for the state to review those proposed cloud seeding operations, ensure that they are operating in accordance with some standards, that they're complying with reporting requirements, that the state understands what their operations entail, and that that we, again, because cloud seeding will cover a lot of geographic and other regulatory boundaries, that there isn't that confusion as far as what's authorized, what's not, and that nuisance litigation is intended to be avoided, I guess.
Man, nuisance litigation, that was actually at the core of, and I'm not like a great historian on this, but I believe that's the core of, at the heart of how Scientology got tax exempt. Because essentially they were applying for tax exempt status as a religion. And it was my understanding the IRS originally was like, you're not a religion. Like that's not it. And they sued. There was this mass effort to file suit, not just against the IRS, but they filed suit against the individual IRS agents and auditors that were auditing them. And they like mass lawsuits, like thousands and thousands. And eventually the IRS just broke. They're like, we can't fight this. And like, you're actually suing our individual employees who are just like, anyway, so there is a precedence for being concerned about the mass nuisance lawsuit that in effect, like totally grinds to a halt any kind of program that you may not like, especially like you see, not like the petition, like Go Petition, or it's not GoFundMe. It's there's some petition site where it's like, you see things that happen across the country, and using social media and upregulating, scalable communication, people are capable of engaging and sending like 10,000 emails to an obscure, judge in the middle of, Kansas who, did something that people didn't like. And all of a sudden they crash their email servers and like they can't function anymore because they got a bunch of that stuff. So that's kind of like the nature of nuisance lawsuits.
So, that sounds like an interesting analogy to me, not being a lawyer. That makes sense. But
you're like,
yeah,
Matt, you're talking about, listen, I don't know. I thought Scientology, just because there are, I don't like the idea that like there's some legislation from years ago that says like, hey, you can't sue Idaho Power. And it's like, oh no, like I've been stripped of my legal capacity to defend myself. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, but we already have this mechanism everywhere. Like you can't, like if we have permitting processes for things you may not enjoy. Like we have a dump. We have people that, build houses that block our views. We have like people get permits and draw between the lines. And if we just want to start suing all of these people for everything that we don't like, that would be a real problem. Yeah. That's just me.
Well, no, and I think you touched on something. I think the intent, of course, of the state and the Idaho Water Resource Board is to be as transparent as possible. Sure. And so this process, the authorization process, the information that's being gathered from the operators is intended to be available to the public. And I think It's worth noting that just this summer, our staff have implemented a more robust website to try and get more of that information out there. It's on the IDWR website under the Water Resource Board and cloud seeding. And we want to try and accommodate and be responsive to those public inquiries so that people can participate in that process and understand the due diligence that's been accomplished through the authorization process, and recognizing that the program is still evolving. So we're interested in that input.
Gotcha. And people can get that at IDWR website?
Yes, IDWR website. Another location that or access to information during the winter months when cloud seeding is occurring. It should. I'm not sure that everybody realizes that the operators like Idaho Power give a regular monthly update at a couple of different public meetings. One is hosted by the Water Board, and it's focused on water operations in the Upper Snake as we're rolling through the winter months and starting to get a handle on what the water supplies look like. But Idaho Power also gives, I believe it's a monthly update at what they call a water supply committee meeting, and that is open to the public. It includes all of the federal weather agencies, and it's an interesting meeting to track for those of us who are really curious about how the water supply season is evolving.
I'm really interested in this in particular because I believe in freedom very much, like not crazy. Like, listen, whenever somebody says I believe in freedom, they're just followed up with something ridiculous. I'm not trying to do that. What I'm saying is I think if there's a state or an area that says, hey, collectively, we don't want, like Tennessee decided, hey, we don't want cloud seeding. And like, I think Tennessee citizens and Tennessee legislators should have the right to do that. Like, I'm not advocating for, like, I'm trying to understand what's going on. But I also think it's really important as people are making those decisions and forming their opinions about the world that they live in, that they have really good information, not just on what's happening, but the consequence. Like somebody might look at your website and be like, oh, silver iodide, I don't like that. Like, boom, we should stop this. And they should have the right to do that. I think people should have a voice and have the ability to affect their environment. That's why we're the 50 states. And I think it's a beautiful thing. Mm-hmm. But I also think that they need to have better access to information about like, okay, we can stop this, right? Like we absolutely can halt all cloud seeding. And if there's anything else you dislike, we can stop that. Like we can do these things. This is the downstream effect. Like this is Bill. Bill's a farmer. Bill benefits from cloud seeding. I would like you to talk to Bill because like without it, like Bill's family back in the 40s started, farming in this area that was a desert and they were using the pumps that were developed in the 30s. And now Bill is running out of water because we don't have as much, blah, 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 like all the, like confront this problem. Right. And by the way, this is, a ski resort that needs more snowpack. And they have inconsistent snowpacks, which is driving their recreational facilities out of business. Like you need to, and that's Jim, confront, or Susie. I don't know why they're guys. So like Susie, like talk to Susie over there who runs, bogus space. I think people should be allowed to make decisions about how their state is operated. That's beautiful. But I also think that we have become so reductionist with supplying information and connecting all the dots. It's like, okay, yes, we can stop this. This is what will happen. We will lose theoretically over 1 million acre feet of water, and that will cause these things to happen. We will increase costs of food production. We will drive farmers out of business, or a certain portion of farmers out of business. We will have water insecurity, meaning some years we'll have a boom of it, and that's great. And then some years we'll have very little, which leads to inconsistent or unpredictable industry growth in these areas. We'll have increased cost of power. We'll have all of these things. I'm not making these things up. These are just things that exist in the world. Let's just put all of these things on the table and help people decide like, okay, now pick. Now you get to pick. But you have to have a more complete view of the ramifications of doing this, right? It's a tricky business.
It's a tricky business, yes.
Is that all that information on IDWR website?
Well, and I would.
And if it's not, we should get it there. Like
right,
we should get it. Like
exactly.
We should have people from the different industries come in and be like, "This is how cloud seeding would affect me if you eliminate it. Like if you take away 1.2 million acre feet of water, this is what would happen to me specifically." Like why don't we have? Why don't we have this information? This is a great idea. I came up with one just now.
It's a great idea. I'm taking notes right now.
Oh my God! But like that's what people should be confronting. Correct.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree, and you brought up, you just reminded me of something that's worth noting. That so we've got information out on the website. Certainly, part of what the Water Board supports is the operations side of at least what we call the collaborative program, which includes the cloud seeding in the Boise River Basin, the Wood River Basin, and in the Upper Snake, which in Idaho we like to think of as really that upstream area on eastern Idaho above Milner Dam. Those are all basins that are where the state is collaborating with Idaho Power as the operator, the cloud seeding operator. They have a long history, very sophisticated program, and the state and the water users in those basins have recognized that. So the water users are also a partner in that collaborative program. So it's kind of a three-pronged approach. All of those three entities contribute funding and other ways to the program. So that information is out on the site, but there are a couple of other programs that are authorized by the board in the state of Idaho, and those are operated by the High Country RC&D to target that more northeastern side of Idaho, so up in Henry's Fork, Mud Lake area. The state of Utah also has some ground generators located in Idaho, and so that requires that the state of Utah actually get authorization for cloud seeding by the Water Resource Board.
And is that for storms that are southeast headed?
You know, I'm going to call a friend here, but yeah, I think that, yes, that's the case.
Because the idea is that you have to get ahead of the storm. Like somebody sent me a pattern of where planes fly, and they're like, the planes are flying directly over Boise. They're not even flying over, Bogus Basin or something. I'm like, yeah, but that's because the storms are moving, right?
Correct.
Like they have to seed them, and then like the snow doesn't fall directly down; it falls sideways, right? Like
yeah,
they have
really
to get sideways, but you got to get it so like by the time it hits, it's hitting in the snowpack.
Yeah, they're targeting it on that windward side,
Right.
and that's another thing that people can view on IDWR's website, or at least some maps that indicate the general region that's being targeted and the flight paths and that kind of thing. So there are a number of different programs that are authorized. Really, I guess it's just those three, and then Idaho Power has an independent program that they operate in the Payette system. But of course, we know that some of the operations that occur to target the Payette also spill over into the Boise. So there is some overlap between those programs. And again, that was, I think, part of the reasoning behind the legislation, was to ensure that, knowing that there's going to be that overlap in operations, that there is some sort of oversight and review over how these programs are being implemented. The one other comment I'll make, just spinning off of your earlier statements, was that the state, and I'll say our staff, I'll credit Kayla Golden with this, has really done a nice job of trying to network with our sister states, and particularly those in the West, that are also entertaining all of these issues. And they're supporting cloud seeding moving forward, and trying to identify that research and the tools, modeling tools, data collection, that kind of thing, that are needed to address the questions that you've been touching on here. And so WMA, which is Weather Modification Association, is one of those organizations. State of Idaho participates in that. And we're starting to realize that is a really good way to leverage that information, the data, and the technical resources that are out there, given that it is a relatively small industry, despite the fact that it's getting a lot of visibility right now.
A lot of visibility, and it has a mass impact. Like there's nothing that I'm going to do as an individual that's like going to make 1.2 million acre feet of water, right? Like it's a small industry, and it's a small collection of people. But it has mass effects on our state, economically, like all kinds of different ways. And especially considering the mass growth of population here. It's like, we did not increase the water supply. Like, let's be clear, like this Star. Okay. I spoke with Mayor Chadwick of Star recently. Great guy, like really had a good time with him. But he was saying, like, listen, in the last 4 years, we went from 11,000 people to 21,000 people in 4 years, almost doubled.
Wow.
And you're like, what? That's crazy. He was like, yeah. And like, that's just the way this is going for us. We are growing in population. Like, we didn't get a doubling of water in the state in that same time. He didn't get a doubling of water in Star at the same time. So there are these realities that we have to confront. And again, having all this information to realize like, okay, look, we got to do something. And, the getting on the same page is the first thing, right? It's understanding what people are doing, what they're not doing, what people in people's intents are and what they're not. Like, obviously with this HB 266, it's like the intent is not to disenfranchise Idaho citizens. The intent is to recognize that there is a demand for users and suppliers and the whole thing. Like, there's a real benefit here, and we should create a robust system to make sure that people engaged in this activity are operating appropriately, and then have them be able to operate with confidence that they're not going to be, make these millions and millions of dollars of investments to improve the state of Idaho's water supply and then come to a grinding halt because, you have like 1,000 people file a lawsuit against them instantaneously. Cynthia, we've talked about a lot of things. I know we're a little short on time today. Yeah. Is there anything you want to hit? And I'd love to have you back. I know, it's a work day and everything. Is there anything you'd like to hit here at the end?
No, I think that covers it. And again, I would also recommend that the viewers watch the other podcasts that you've produced related to cloud seeding. I know Idaho Power's been in, and Kayla Golden with IDWR, but really appreciate the time because we do want to make this information available to the public.
If possible, I would love to have you back, cloud seeding unrelated, to talk about the wrangle that we're having with our agricultural water supply, because this is one of those things that I had TJ Budge on, who was, he was fantastic. He was such a good guy. He was in a minivan, I think, in a dentist parking lot on his iPhone, like such a gangster to go out of his way. Because like he lives like 4 or 5 hours away, and we kept trying to align. Here he's this busy attorney representing the pump farmers. And we had this incredible conversation, but it took him like 45 minutes to explain. I mean, I'm a dum-dum. So he was like, it took him 45 minutes to explain the whole background of the situation and where we were. And we were actually having the conversation the day that the water curtailment actually got repealed. It was great. So it was like, he was like, I have really good news. But it's complex and people are concerned about it. There's also a large number of people that are still concerned that the federal government is funding cobalt mining in the Snake Plains Aquifer. And again, he said there's not, and I have not heard anybody actually articulate a company name. It's like, okay, if there's a cobalt miner, what's the name of the company and where are they? And it's like, come up with crickets. Anyway, there are a lot of issues in Idaho with water. I'd love to have you back if you'd be game. That's it.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for the time. Appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
Thank you.